So, I am here with Mark Nicholson, and this is episode 5 of Escaping the Undertow. And today, what I want to talk about, this is going to be a little bit different than what I've ever done before. It's going to be a lot more interactive. Is I want to talk about, the topic is guys and grief.
Right.
Okay, so I got the thought of this several years ago, and I was talking to somebody and thinking about, how guys process loss and why we behave probably a little bit differently than many women, a little bit more afraid to show our emotions and to talk about certain things. And so we had discussed this a while ago. I'd reached out. I knew you had lost your dad about 10 years ago.
Yeah.
I'm about 16 years out now. And so I wanted to talk about that with you and just kind of open up a little bit about that and show people that you can have discussions without breaking down into a puddle
Pretty much.
on the floor. So first of all, tell me a little bit about your dad and what happened and how many years ago was that? And
My dad died at the age of 67. He was born in 1945. Grew up in around like the Nakwik, Ritchie area, and worked at the mill in Nakwik for a long time. But he was also a barber. That a lot of people didn't know that about him. So he had a trade to his name, which was good. But Dad was always the guy. He was always the comical guy, in the crowd, and a lot of people liked him and remember him as such. But Dad had his demons too. But he got sick in I can't remember the exact year, Tim. He was probably around 57 to 58 years old when he got diagnosed. He had multiple myeloma, which is like a blood cancer. And they didn't give him much time, really to kind of, they didn't really know where things were going to go. And it was pretty grim for a little while, but he was able to kind of get past the disease and go into a remission, and he got, 10 to 12 years more than he was expected to live, which was really good. But I remember the call, the night that he passed away. I was out at a rehearsal, and it was my first day back to Corey Ford after a short absence of being at the other car dealership, the other Corey store. But it was October the 2nd when he passed away.
what year?
2012.
Okay.
2012. So he passed away October 2nd, 2012. And I knew it was coming. But, it's like anything. When they're still there, they're still there.
Yeah.
And you don't really prepare for it.
Right.
And you mentioned that grief thing. I knew it was coming, but I didn't know what was coming, right? How it was going to feel.
Isn't it funny how when you say that, so yours was October
2nd, 2012.
2012.
Yeah.
Mine was March 1st, 2005.
Wow.
And I don't know about you, but I can remember exactly where I was.
Yeah.
I can remember almost who was around me, what time of year, like the smells in the air, like everything.
Yeah.
It almost like there are certain things that happen that just take you right back to that spot.
Exactly.
And you can remember exactly.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
It's incredible.
I think for me it was like 2:00 in the morning or so when Carmen called me. Carmen's my stepmom, and she called me and she said, "Dad's gone." And I said, "Okay." And I hung up the phone and I just fell to the floor.
Yeah.
That was it, and it was hard,
Yeah.
but then I had to bring it all together.
Yeah.
And the days and the months and the years following
Right.
are, how you kind of cope and make your way through,
It's funny.
Same
Thing for me. I remember vividly. I was out at the gym with a friend of mine. I was in much better shape back then.
Yeah.
I was 25. And I walked in the door, and a lady who owned the house, I was living in Toronto, and she just looked at me and she said, "You better call home."
Mm-hmm.
And so I knew right away. I was like, so the hardest thing you're ever going to have to go through.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what kind of things have helped you think, to make it
Oh my gosh.
get through that?
Well, a lot of it was just time,
Yeah.
for me, because that wasn't the end of it. It seemed like, Dad passed away in 2012, And at the same time we were dealing with Dad, my mom was sick with cancer as
Right.
well.
So you really couldn't
So
take the time
I couldn't
to.
take the time to really focus on my dad to a certain point.
Right.
I had to be strong because Mom was now sick with terminal cancer, stage 4 lung cancer. You know, she'd go through peaks and valleys, bing bang boom, and then June passed away. So I was stuck with Dad, you know, grieving for Dad, and that was still fresh in my mind when Mom passed away. You know, in August of 2014, she passed away. June died in July of 2015,
Right.
and so it was just like bing bang boom. All right,
And-
so now my head's really screwed.
Well-
And I turned to booze,
Right.
is what I did.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
I turned to booze for the longest time. I'd say a good 3 or 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
And then I eventually quit that.
It's good that you admit that.
Yeah.
It's funny because I'll admit it. I was 25 at the time. I did the same thing.
Yeah.
Right. And I remember thinking to myself, thank God I have close friends and family. And I finally just gave my head a shake and I was like, you can't live like that.
No.
Right. Like this is not a way to
Yeah.
make anything better. In fact, it's just going to make everything a whole lot worse.
It's just going to really, really, you know,
Right.
send you spiraling if you let it get out of control.
Right.
And
But you don't
that's-
want to deal with those emotions at the time.
Exactly.
Right. Like you just
Yeah.
don't want to.
Yeah.
And then I'm sure you have felt the same way since that time. There will be days where you're fine. All of a sudden, it's like a punch in the gut.
Yeah.
You just get hit with it and you're like, whoa.
Oh yeah, it's
You
like
know.
it's like a bit of reality kind of almost
Right.
comes back. I mean, like when my dad passed away, it was, you know, I didn't stay away from work very long. You know,
Right.
I went back to work.
No, I think I did the same thing. Like 1 week I took off and it was like,
So, you know,
that's not a good
enough.
idea.
That's
No.
not enough.
No.
And people were coming at you, you know, it's like, hey, when you coming back to work? So I don't want to come back to work. You know, I'd rather stay home and grieve and be mad and be upset. But, you know, that was hard because my dad was always around the shop too.
Oh, okay.
You know, he always come in.
Yeah.
And so, you know, not being able to have those laughs, you know, those stories, or, you know, because Dad was always he was always around,
Yeah.
always calling, always, you know.
Yeah.
And so that you miss,
Right.
you know. And, but the getting over it, you know, I remember very well, like I have I have Dad's old truck as well.
You're about to get hugged.
Am I going to get hugged? I have Dad's old truck as well. And I would take that truck and drive to Ritchie, which is just above Nackwick, where they're all from. And
Go down.
and I remember the first time I went back to
Lay down.
Dad's gravesite, and I had the truck, and geez, as soon as I hit that Ritchie Road, the tears just started streaming, you
Right.
know. And I had Dad's truck, I had everything around me, but I could feel it.
Yeah.
I could still feel all of that
Yeah.
power or that energy of my father around me
Yeah.
at that time, you know.
That's the cool part for me, and I think you probably appreciate this as well, is the only thing you can seem to do when you're dealing with that stuff is just to find a way to channel into the positive things
Yes.
that, like I'm sure there's traits that you got from him that
Oh yeah.
every once in a while you'll do something and you'll kind of say, gee, I wonder what,
Yeah.
what my dad would have said about that, right?
Yeah.
Or you're dealing with a tough problem and you're like, geez, if I could just talk to my dad just once and figure out, I got this tough issue that I'm trying to deal with,
Yeah.
and then sometimes the answers come to you and you're like, geez, I wonder if I am getting some answers to some of these things. And
Well, and that's the thing, like I found for the longest time, like it was, I had a lot of questions, like why, and like, is this real? Am I dealing with this loss? This is the first time, I lost grandparents and I lost relatives before.
but it's nothing
But
like that.
This is nothing like that.
No.
No.
And I don't know, like I've talked to my mother before and I've talked to other people. I don't know if there's an age where it gets any easier.
No.
Yeah, it was pretty hard when I was younger,
Mm.
but then I think even when I get older, you're like, no, it's not that.
Yeah. No, I don't think it does. I mean, like no matter what, you're never really prepared. We're still, we're still the same on the inside, no matter how old we get, I think. To a certain point.
Why is it that you don't think people want to talk about it more?
I don't know.
Is it too personal? Is it too...
Some people are reserved. Some
Right?
people are reserved. Some people, like Jen, for example, like she's quiet with a lot of stuff, whereas maybe I'm more open with certain topics.
Right.
And I guess it's just a comfort level, isn't it? You know,
Yeah.
like I think it is. Like, you know, really, it boils right down to what you're comfortable talking about and how open you are. Like, I've always been an open book, you know, when it comes to talking about, you know, grief. And people are always like, you know, I should feel better by now, or I should this or should that by now.
Right.
Who says?
Do you ever?
Right.
Yeah,
said
that's
it?
an interesting one. That you should be over it by now, or
Right.
you should be feeling better by now, and you kind of go, you have no idea, and you kind of have to just be with somebody where they're at.
Exactly.
My wife calls it holding space for somebody, and you kind of,
Sure.
without judgment or without,
Yep.
you know, because everybody goes through it totally differently.
Oh yeah.
And it's pretty tough.
Yep.
You know, to face that.
It is, and you know, again, I think it just boils right down to, you know, like how people are, you know, comfort in terms of, you know, speaking about it, letting it out. And, I mean, talking about it's important. I find, you know, just to let it out. It's a good little bit of therapy to speak with somebody who has gone through something similar, you know,
sure.
as well, and say, hey, okay, I'm not alone. You're feeling the same. You get it. You understand where I'm coming from.
Right.
Or if I'm having an off day, like I had so many days where I sat in my office and I didn't want to do anything.
Yeah.
I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to function.
Right.
My dad's not here anymore. How do I
Right.
function? Everybody else's life is normal, and I'm back to work and mine's not. You
Right.
know, because my dad's gone. I don't
Yeah.
have him anymore. So that was hard. That was hard getting used to life without that person
For sure.
for a long time too.
Yeah.
I found.
And then you realize that everybody has something like that,
Oh yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
whether it's their dad or their brother or their, you
Yeah.
know, whatever it is that they're going through, it's just people deal with it a lot differently. How is it now for you? Like you said, it's been about 10 years.
Mhm.
Do you think it's better now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's better now. I mean, I think time helps the pain go away. The memories are always there, right? So and you know, I can sit down and I can watch a video of Dad, and depends on the video. Maybe some days it's like I can laugh at it, and then there's some days it's like, you know, I'll cry watching the video. Just like, wow, you know, that's something else, you know. But yeah, it's a lot easier, I find, you know, with a lot of that. It's I wish they were here, you know, to see what we're doing now.
Right.
You know, I think your dad would be very proud of you and what
Well,
you've done
and you
in
know,
your career.
like, that's a
and I
really
wish that my parents were here to see
yeah.
the
That's
same thing.
that's a funny
right?
that's a funny that you go to that, because so I won't say the whole story here, but so I was sitting with a bunch of friends around a fire and we get into this conversation probably about a month to 6 weeks ago, and one person kind of turns to me and says, what's the one thing that you would, like, we were talking about mortality and our parents and our family, and, you know, a really honest question, like, what's the one thing that you would ask if you could?
Yeah.
And I just fell apart. It just hit me a certain way, and that was the one thing, like, are you proud now? Right?
Yeah.
Like, you can say to yourself, yeah, I know they would be, like, you know, but there's a difference to hear that from your parent rather than just you,
A friend,
right? Like, you
or-
probably know that too. Like, there's stuff
exactly.
that you probably, like, so here's, I'm going to turn it back on you. Let's try not to lose our shit here.
Yeah.
What is one thing that you would ask or talk about if you could?
I would like to see them just see me, you know, where I'm at in my life now. You know, that some of the hurdles that we've been through. You know, like, and with us, you know, when we were growing up, I mean, we weren't the most fortunate family. You know, so we had struggles and shit like that. And I think a lot of us outgrew all of that as well. You know, we left our past behind, and we all did well for ourselves and what we want to do. And I think that, you know, in terms of, you know, if my parents were here to say, you know, to look at each one of us, my brother, my sister, myself, and I have 3 other siblings, you know, from Dad's second marriage, I think he could be, you know, definitely could be proud of all of us, you know, in the way that we have grown up. We're not bad kids. We haven't, you know, we're not, in jail, and Dad never had
Right.
troubles with us, and
Isn't that like
and
yeah,
this and that, so he had, Dad had his demons, but yet he also had ways. It seemed that we turned out to be good people.
yeah, and listen, isn't that like what we all hope for our kids? Like no matter
Yeah,
which,
right.
we kind of put the guardrails on, and we hope like,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, no matter how you turn out, just be a good person.
Yeah,
Like that's-
exactly. So I think that they would be proud that we're good people, that we're honest, and we're working, and I mean, none of us are wealthy in oodles of money, but we're wealthy in health and family, and we've got good people around us,
which is
So-
more important. Anyways,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah. And so I think that and my dad understood, like he would come into the dealership and I would be having a lot of, I had a lot of bad days in that business because it was stressful,
Right.
and a lot of the times, you beat yourself up over a lot of things, and Dad would have a way of, changing that a little bit,
Right.
and when he died, I didn't have it. So I went
Yeah.
10 years, without him,
Without that perspective.
and that guidance, and saying, it really hurt for a long time to not have that support, because he was my rock, and getting me through a lot of, he was there to he picked me up and let's go for a drive. All right, let's
Right.
go.
Yeah.
We disappear for an hour, Dad, I better get back to the office. Why?
Yeah.
Well, I got work to do. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So then we'd go back to the shop, and it was as much his outing as it was mine.
Right.
I think, and Dad had that heart of gold where he was, he knew stuff, and he could sense stuff would be wrong, or he knew more than he'd let on. And I think I'm that way too. And I think you're probably the same way
Oh,
as a
100%.
dad with your kids, right?
100%, yeah.
You know shit that your kids don't think you know.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, totally.
My dad was that way too. I couldn't get anything past him, it seemed, so.
Absolutely, but always know exactly the right thing to say at the right time.
Seem to.
Right?
They seem to. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
hard when you don't have that there,
Yeah.
and you're struggling a little bit, or you're trying to figure out like,
Oh, absolutely.
okay, just what would my dad do in this circumstance?
Yeah.
I think what you come to, for me, and the only way that I've been able to make sense of it, is you're given like certain deep instilled values
Yes.
that cannot be shaken,
Yeah.
and where that comes from, and like that's an important part about
Yeah.
who you are. And for me, that's really what's connected me most with my dad, and
Mhm.
and to think about that is like, I've learned so many things
Yeah.
even in the short period of time that I had,
Mm-hmm.
that you won't shake me on it.
Oh,
Like,
exactly. Yeah.
Whatever it is,
Yeah.
that's pretty cool.
Exactly. And I mean, like you'll always have the little memories. You'll always have the little things. And like you said earlier in the conversation, I mean, you could be somewhere and then all of a sudden you might smell something, you might hear something, or something will trigger that memory, and it's like, oh shit, that's Dad. He's watching me. Or you get a sign.
Right.
Jen's kind of open with some of that stuff. I'm not so much, but
My wife is
she's
too.
she's like, oh, that's your dad watching you, and I'm like, oh yeah, okay.
So
maybe.
funny that you say that story. So I should go down the road on that. So
Yeah.
right after my dad passed away, I remember I was working in Toronto,
Mm-hmm.
and for some reason I wanted a set of cufflinks and a tie clip.
Mhm.
And so we went out and we were looking all over the place for these cufflinks. Couldn't find anything around here. So he gave me these, like they had a maple leaf on them,
Mhm.
these cufflinks. And
Yeah.
so I wanted to wear those at the funeral, but one of them went missing. Be
Uh-oh.
damned if, like, in my family and I turned our house upside down, like just looked everywhere. And we finally were just laughing, like, listen, it's my dad. He's playing a trick on me.
Yeah.
Right? Like just laughing his ass off. Like, like these are the cufflinks that I gave to you, and you're not. So, and those things happen all the time.
Oh yeah.
Where you're just like,
Yeah.
you just kind of give your head a shake and like,
I know.
weird,
Yeah.
right?
And that's like when Dad died as well. Like we went to the house that morning. It was, like I say, it was about 2:00 in the morning when he passed away. And I got to the house. By the time I got Drew and Kayla up and June got up, we were down to Nackwick around 4, somewhere around there. And we pull in the yard, and there's a deer in the backyard. Like come when the sun's coming up, there's a deer standing, and he lives in the town of Nakawik.
Weird.
Right? There's a deer standing in the backyard, and it's like, wow. And I think it was just one. And so, okay, that's interesting. And so when we went to the funeral home, it was one of the visits, either pre-funeral or, visiting night. I can't remember. We got out of the car, look up in the field. It was in Nakawik at Flewelling's, deer standing in the field. So it's like, I think something's watching over us here. This is
Right.
interesting, right?
Yeah.
So it was kind of, you remember those little things, So anytime I see a deer in around the Nakawik area, which there's plenty of them down around there,
Gives you a little bit of peace.
kind of a little bit of peace, and that morning as well, like when Dad passed away, like I didn't get to see him before they took him away, but I mean there wasn't much left of him because of the cancer and stuff.
Right.
But I get in the old truck, the old Jeep that morning, and I went by myself. I grabbed the key, didn't tell anybody where I was going, just jumped in the truck and went for a drive around Nakawik, and I knew that word would get out that Dad had passed. Everybody knew him. in
Right.
Nakawik.
Well, listen,
Same with you.
same me. Like you couldn't go anywhere without.
No,
Yeah.
so it's like, so that was just a little connection thing, before the final goodbyes and stuff, So
Yeah.
it was hard, and I found it wasn't so much, I don't know for you, like going through the funeral process and stuff. It was the days following.
Oh man,
that
killer.
really.
killer. Like the funeral stuff. You're so busy and there's
It's
so
a
much
blur.
going on, and you put on a good show, and
Yeah.
our family's all there. It's when everything quiets down,
Yeah,
and you're just kind of sitting there, and it's quiet.
yeah,
And that was the toughest.
it is.
Toughest part of that to go through.
Yeah,
It's funny how you talk about the deer. So my dad this is terrible, hated the song Amazing Grace.
yeah,
Okay, like just didn't like it. Every time it came on, he'd be like, "Oh, I don't like that song."
yeah,
So one night I was at my mom's house, and it was really fresh. Maybe a week after he passed away, and everything had quieted down, and I was kind of laying there beside her, and we had left the TV on, and then it shut down at the end of the broadcast or whatever.
mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, this TV comes on and Amazing Grace is playing.
Oh shit.
Both of us just kind of wake up and we look at each other, and we just, nobody says a word. Just couldn't, that's really weird.
Okay.
Just kind of like, okay, let's all just move on here. Like everything's fine. Like
Yeah.
so it's
Yeah.
But that's cool. Like that's
It was,
part of the stuff that
I
kind
know.
of.
And when you mentioned Amazing Grace, Dad or Carmen, was it Carmen or maybe it was my sister, hired a piper because Dad loved bagpipes.
Right.
And he was buried in Ritchie, so we had to drive from Nakawik to Ritchie, which is like 15 minutes or 10 minutes, normal speed. So it seemed like it took forever to get up the highway to Ritchie and get to the Hillman Cemetery where he's buried. And when we got there was this piper, and I was like, oh. It was just like, it's just like it hits you right in the chest,
I know,
right? And
right?
they're playing Amazing Grace,
Right.
as everybody's leaving, they're playing Amazing Grace, and it's like, oh Jesus, But
Yeah.
again, you're surrounded by family, and you have enough comfort, at that level. You're putting on a strong face, and you're being, I had to now be the funny. I felt I had to take Dad's place for some odd reason.
Yeah.
At that
No.
point.
Listen,
A little bit of
yeah.
Dad was channeling through me at the funeral procession.
Isn't that weird?
the
The
lineups
Same
and-
thing with me.
Yeah, you take on
Right,
a bit of your
like you-
dad's persona,
Once
right?
once they're gone, you feel there's something missing there,
Yeah,
and you kind of feel that need to fill the void and be that person.
yeah.
It's a lot, eh?
Oh, it is.
It's heavy.
It is, and and the after. I guess later on, when I was in the car business, I'd run into a lot of people that were from, say, Nakawik or wherever, and Dad was always a conversation piece as well. Well, you must have known my dad. Well, who's your dad? Ron Nicholson.
Yeah.
Oh Jesus, yes, I worked with him at the
Right.
mill, or I knew Ron. Yes, he was so funny, and so. Dad was always, so legendary that he was almost like he was the icebreaker in many car deals that I put together as well. So
Right,
he
yeah.
wasn't there directly; he was always indirect.
I mean, I get that too. It's like every single person that I meet has some sort of story.
Yes.
Like which is great. It helps me connect.
Yeah.
Because people say, well, my dad your dad did this for me, or he helped me out with this, and like, you know, I just remember he always had an open door and wanted to hear your issues and wanted to talk to you, and like
Exactly.
always had a smile, and that's really neat how you can connect with that stuff.
Yeah, and you're fortunate. You know, we were fortunate to have good fathers too. I'd say.
Awesome. Yeah.
You know, and
For
that goes a
sure.
long way.
Goes a really long way.
Because it just helps us be the people that we are today. You know,
Right.
with what we were saying earlier. You know, being able to put away some of the shit that we grew up with and grow into who we are today. I think
Right.
it would be very, very happy with who we are.
So let's do
Yeah.
some show and tell here.
All right.
So just to introduce people to this, and I actually want to make this interactive. I want other people, if they have something, show us some items that
Yeah.
remind them of their loved one, their parent, or their brother, or their sister, whoever. Just share that. So what did you bring with
Well,
you?
I brought 2 items.
Cool.
I don't have a lot of items out of Dad's. I have a few things, but this here I keep in my studio. Probably reeks of weed.
I'm gonna edit that out.
This is Dad's hat. This was just the
Cool.
Bubba Gump hat that Dad wore he just wore it. I think it came from Florida. I can't remember. I think Drew or Cameron or somebody picked that up in Florida and brought it back, and they gave it to Dad.
And it was
And
like
then-
always wore it.
Yeah, Dad always wore it, and then Drew had it on for a little while. Drew would wear it, and then when Drew he had it one time, and I snuck it. I grabbed it. I said, "That's Dad's hat," and there's a picture of Dad. It's one of my favorites. And before Dad passed away, they went on a trip to St. Andrews. They went whale watching, and I couldn't make that trip, and I kicked my ass for not going.
Yeah.
But he's got a picture, and he's got this hat on, and
Nice.
it's just, this is the hat. And so I hang this up in my studio. It's just, I never wear it. It's just up on
It's
the
like a
wall.
prized possession.
It's just like just a little something. I mean, it's dirty. I've never washed it. You know, it's as it was. You know,
Right.
when he left it. Now this thing here, this
I'm wondering what that is.
is Dad's steam engine. I keep this in my studio as well. So this here was a trinket. We used to live on the Shore Road in Grafton, and I can remember when Dad got this. This was probably 1978 or so. And they have these little briquettes that they lay in this tray, and you put them in, and you fill this with water, and it heats up, and it's a steam engine.
Oh, is the steam actually comes out of it?
Engine, yeah.
Cool.
So
How's
like,
it? What is it powered by? Batteries?
heat.
Really?
The heat. So
Why?
you take there's these
It's gotta
little
be pretty
briquettes.
hot.
It's got to be hot. So there were like little white foam briquettes of some kind. I don't know what the heck they were, but they would emit quite a bit of heat. So he put that in there, and we'd say, Dad, let's play with the steam engine. So he'd set it on the table, he'd light it, and he'd get it going, and this would be full with water. And so what would happen is it would reach a certain temperature, and then you just turn this, and just keep turning it until it would actually be powered on its own, and then you just let it go, and the steam
How long would it go
would
for?
run it. 10 minutes, maybe 5
Right.
minutes.
It's a lot of work for 10 minutes.
You know, it was a great thing. So it was a great entertainment piece, great conversation piece. And I posted this on Facebook one time. I just said, hey, look, you know, like I got my dad's old steam engine. It's pretty cool. It was just like a show and tell thing. And then I got a few responses come in, like Terry Hunter. You know Terry? School teacher from, he was my grade 4 teacher. Anyway.
Sounds really familiar.
And Terry lives up in Florenceville, and Terry's got a steam engine as well. And so it just opened up some conversation and stuff. So it's all original. I'd like to be able to get it cleaned up and restored proper. I've never run it, you know, and I still got Dad's Jeep at home, and I still got I've got got a few clothing pieces and stuff, but not a whole lot of things. I have enough stuff in the house as it is
Yeah,
that I like
right.
to keep a couple of small things. You've got
Yep.
some interesting pieces too.
Yeah, so check this out. This is an actual glove that I used to play catch with my dad with.
I love
it. And like, so you catch the ball like right here.
Yeah.
And then you put your hand up really quick like that, right? And I used to be like, how do you even use it? Right? Like, how is that even possible?
I dig it.
Right? But that's like the old school.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, so I mean, I keep this on my shelf, and I couldn't get rid of it if I tried.
So would your dad have had that when he was a boy? Like
I think so.
that must have
I'm
been his
pretty
when he was
sure.
younger, I bet.
But I mean, it's still, I can put that on. Right,
Yeah.
it's a little bit tight, but
Yeah.
no. So, but I remember vividly, like we'd
That is so
be in the
cool.
backyard and using that, and so it's just like you don't see anything like that.
You don't. Like, I
These
wonder what
days
year
like
that
that.
thing is from.
I
Like, that's
don't
got to be
even-
like 40s.
I don't know,
It's gotta be
honestly.
the 40s.
I don't know,
30s.
but that was like
Yeah.
something that really connected me with my dad was like we both love baseball.
Yes.
And so like it drives my wife crazy, but like I have a routine now every time there's a ball game on, my little guy, and I'll like almost force him to watch it.
Yeah.
Right? Like I'm sure it bores him, but I just remember, those good memories, and that's kind of
yeah.
a way that I always connect is we kind of sit there and talk about it, and I remember
I love it.
that. And my second one, and this is pretty cool. It was my first guitar.
Yep.
It's an Epiphone, just a Strat copy.
Yep.
And it was strung backwards.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that
Yep.
it didn't like it. Look at that. That's not even. So I'm sure it didn't totally, work the way it should have. But it was it. I pounded this thing for years.
Oh yeah.
And it's been used so much that the electronics don't work anymore.
Oh, is that right?
Well, it's got some issues.
Yeah.
Right. Like it got to a point. I remember I was using this in university, and some of the guys that I was in a band with at the time were like, "Dude, you got to get a new guitar."
Oh, man,
Like
yeah.
I was like, it's hard to let it go, but So this was 15, around, and this was like for my birthday when I was 15 or 16.
Yes.
And it was like under a bed upstairs, and my dad said, "Oh, you better go looking for it. I got you
Wow.
a gift." And this was the gift, and man, did I make some noise.
Oh man.
Like had a whammy bar.
Yes. Yeah.
And but that's another thing, like the music
Yeah.
for me was just I was so supported in that.
Absolutely.
And it's become like basically my therapy throughout most of my life. Probably similar to you, right?
Dad
Like,
was that way too with me with the guitar. Like he actually like it was funny because when we were growing up, he was always listening to records. He was always listening to be it records, be it the radio was always on in the car. It was always on in the house, and so he had a deep love of music.
Yeah.
And so that kind of was
Yeah.
where I got my love of music from.
Right.
And then to play it, like to Dad bought me my first guitar as well, and I wish I still had it like you do. But
Yeah.
I mean, he was the driving force behind it.
Yeah, me too.
Play it if you want.
Yeah.
And I'll support you. And
Yeah.
he was never like, oh, you better go practice, or you better go do this, or better go do that. Dad never put anything on us. at
No, me
all.
neither, actually.
And he was really good with that.
Yeah.
No pressure, but it was like he would take my guitar, and I used to get mad at him because he'd take the guitar, and like you, he was left-handed. He'd flip my guitar around, and it was strung right-handed, and he'd make these god-awful chords, and he'd be sitting there playing, and at first I was like, how the hell's he doing this? He's making that thing sound all right. And then I learned how to play a little bit better, and then I used to get mad. It's like, Dad, don't touch my guitar.
sounds
Knock it out
terrible,
of tune. It sounds awful.
Yeah.
But there's some video floating around on Facebook. My buddy Alan McGrath always used to take video cameras everywhere.
Right.
And he's like a year younger than me. And anyway, he would film. And so one time he was coming to pick me up to go to Moncton on a road trip. Brought his video camera, and he's up in my bedroom in Grafton, and Dad's sitting there. And at that time, Dad would have been younger than I am now. He would have been in his mid-40s. I'm 51. So at that time, Dad would have been in his mid-40s or early 40s. And he's sitting on my bed playing guitar, and I'm sitting there playing guitar with him, we're
That's
jamming.
cool.
And that's cool because there's not a lot of that footage
Right.
with him and I
Right.
everywhere, right?
Yeah.
And I think that, if Dad would have been around long enough, like to see us progress in music too, he'd be like, wow,
It's amazing, eh?
But
But that's cool because it's something you're always going to have.
Yeah,
And it's something for me that nobody can ever take away.
that's right.
Right? Like you
Exactly.
can always find that as a refuge to,
Yeah.
my knees will go,
Yep.
probably my back will go, but I'll always be able to connect with that one way
Exactly.
or another, which is pretty cool.
Exactly. And like I found like to say like I took a lot of what the hell am I looking for here? Shelter in music, I guess I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
I'm trying to find recluse. No, I can't find the word I'm thinking of. But it took a lot of, I listened to a lot of music as therapy.
Yeah.
And I played a lot of music too. I got deep into music for the longest time. That's all
Yeah.
I did.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. And so
Still do it.
Oh yeah.
Right? Like that's
Yep.
it's something you can connect with.
Yep.
And what's neat about it is not only the emotional side of it, but you're channeling when you're focused on, if you're like me, I'm just struggling hard enough to keep doing what I'm doing and not making mistakes. So you don't have time to think about anything else.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's a great way to get away from whatever it is that ails you, because you got to focus on what you're doing, or you'll
Exactly.
make mistakes. So.
And I mean, when you say that too, like I was just going to ask you a question. You think about your dad each and every day?
Probably.
I do.
I got a picture in my office.
Yeah.
And there's at least twice a week where I'll just kind of look at it and go, what are we thinking about this, or what,
Yeah,
like,
exactly. Yeah. There's
that's-
always something every day. It's like there's a point in time, or there's a little memory. But I've said that to myself. Like I've noticed that since Dad has passed away, there's not one single day that's gone by that I don't think about it.
Yeah, that's probably fair.
Same with my mom, and same with with June and things like that. There's always something, a little trigger somewhere.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
And so those are nice too. Like you always have that sense that they're with you.
Yeah.
No matter what. That's what
Well,
I
and,
find.
and listen, like I I changed this up. I've done my other videos in more of a like bookshelfy kind of dining room area, and this
Yeah.
is my man cave.
Yeah.
This is where I feel most at home.
Yeah,
with,
exactly.
With that, and I think most of my memories, like I kind of surround myself with the music and the things that, and that was something that was really instilled in me. Again, not pressured, but
Yep.
gave me the tools and was willing to like go out and buy me guitars and do things to support that. And
Exactly.
so that's really where I get
Yep.
probably my highest level of vibration, if you will.
Oh yeah.
To do that. But yeah, you're right. Every day.
Every day.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's there.
So I guess in kind of closing, and I'm going to ask people to share some of their, whether it's a video or a photo of something that really reminds you of somebody,
Yeah.
and see what comes out of it.
Uh-huh.
I think we'll see some interesting things. I've certainly enjoyed the conversation. Actually, it's gone so easily that we probably could have sat here and talked for hours. But
When you get into a general conversation about something that's on common ground, you can go forever.
yeah. Well, thanks a lot for sitting with me.
Hey, no
and,
problem, man.
I've
I dig
enjoyed
it.
it, and
Yeah.
took a little while to get this done. But
Look, it's hard, like when everybody has busy lives and everybody, it seems like we're all middle-aged people. It seems. Well, Terry and I we're much older, but I tell you, it's we're just as busy all the time doing something, right?
It's true, eh?
Yeah.
Busy doing something, but really not stopping.
Really doing
and smelling-
nothing.
Yeah. Stop and smell the roses.
Exactly.
All right. Well, thanks.
Yeah, man.